before the next council meeting, because the other thing is the appraisal firms are in business. They want to earn fees. This is not the way they're earning fees. It's not a competent business procedure. The other thing is, everyone within 200 feet receives certified mail regarding a court order issued on January 19th. And I had asked questions on January 22nd at the council meeting. Now, this court order is saying that the judge is putting through an ordinance number 356-17 as a court order. When we received the first certified letters for the discussion at the June 26th meeting, which was a result of your voting at a May 22nd, 2017 meeting, the ordinance in question was 366-17. Okay, and that had the 4 properties on it. 356-17 now just has the Cross Avenue National Lead site, and it has the River Road site. Then at the January 22nd meeting and the January 8th meeting, you had ordinance 392-18, which was the Cross Avenue National Lead site. All 3 ordinances are different. It's very confusing to the residents, and we would like to understand it more fully, how this is all progressing, because things that were out of the ordinance, as far as like the land that the borough owns being used as open space, we had that improved so that they, if it was unfortunately possibly developed, they wouldn't be able to use the borough land without the borough being compensated for it, because we had, as residents, voted on whether we wanted to sell that acreage in the November, I believe, 16's election and what have you. So it's all very, very confusing. Where did ordinance 356-17 come from when we were only certified letter notified on 366-17? Then I don't know where 392-18 came from and why. So I really, and the residents would like to be informed of what is actually going on and the past history.
Well, you could take it if you want, but she's got, you have the same questions that we had up here. And I think that was evident for anybody that was sitting here. You've been sitting here the whole time. As those housing elements started to change, because I believe that that's what those ordinances were in reference to, were the housing element changes that were repeated and constant.
Right, so the ordinance that you're making reference to dealt with the National Lead and River Road, which is 356-17, I believe, right?
17,
and
yes.
And the earlier one just dealt with the National Lead. So those are the 2 orders that you're referring to. And then there were subsequent administrative ordinances that had to be introduced and adopted pursuant to the court order, and that was done. So the particular ordinances that you're referring to were court orders that dealt with first National Lead back in June, I believe, and then in December or January, that dealt with National Lead and River Road. Then the whole matter was recently questioned into fact as to the credits, right? And that's why we are having a motion on all of this, on both of the orders that took into play, that if you calculate those credits, then specifically we need to revise or revisit that settlement agreement that was entered into a while ago. So that's kind of where we're at. So you have 2 orders, right? Both particular orders dealt with specific sites, and now we have a motion filed by our council asking the court to revisit the settlement and those orders as to whether they are necessary.
All right.
It was my understanding, I didn't actually see the court order, that we were told that we had to impose for the National Ed site. Now, how all of a sudden is what went out in those notices is both properties?
No,
The
no,
ordinance
it's
referring to both?
It's River Road and it's National Lead Cross Avenue. And I thought River Road, to confuse the whole issue, I thought River Road was a Sarah site.
That's
I
correct.
thought Sarah was an intervener.
It is,
So
and
I
that-
didn't understand at all why that was part of
Oh, it's allowed-
356-17.
it's 100% affordable housing, so that was included in the site, and the judge is permitting that, and those discussions between Michael Baker and the developer ongoing. So again, there's a couple sites involved here. You make reference to the Kaplan ordinance that happened pursuant to court order in June of 2017, and now you have the ordinance or the order that was approved in January of 2017 that dealt with National Lead, that dealt with River Road and Cross Avenue.
Well, I don't understand, you know, River Road is, you know, not.
But it has to be incorporated in a particular ordinance to allow the 100% affordable to go through.
But it doesn't deal with 100% affordable, it still only deals with 15%.
We're dealing with that right now in ongoing negotiations. I'm not privy to those negotiations with Mr. Baker that Mr. Baker's having with the developer.
But I'm confused because that site never really needed to be rezoned. That is what Sarah was working on long before, you know, this COA settlement got involved in, was 164 units.
Yeah, but-
So it didn't need to be rezoned. So why is the judge ordering it to be
Well,
rezoned?
no, it's because Sarah wanted to participate in this lawsuit, and the only way that Sarah could participate is filing the motion to intervene. So right now, Sarah is intervening for the purpose so that we get the proper credits associated with this.
I realize that, but the order of the judges was to follow the ordinance to rezone this stuff. River Road never needed to be rezoned. So why was there even any order to rezone it when it was never supposed to be rezoned, even in the original order?
Part of this is to allow, as I said, the affordable housing on River Road. I mean, I don't have the order in front of me specifically, but that's the reason behind that order, to allow participation by Sarah. And Mr. Baker has been in discussion and also in financing this particular site. I think Mr. Robinson had brought that up a while ago, and Sarah has kind of now generated some support on that.
Well,
Let me see if I understand this. So she received the latest notice then, and those residents, that was a reaction to the judge's order to have National Lead involved in this COA obligation.
I believe that's the ordinance that she's
That's-
returned.
that's
re-
35617 is the court order, which
The court order that
was dated January 19th, and we were not made aware of even at the last council meeting on January 22nd.
and that was the one that the judge
because
was
the-
forcing in the National Lead site.
Right, and
The
that's
National
because.
Lead and River
Wait,
Road.
I
And
was gonna
River
break
Road,
this up into two
both
sections.
properties.
Right.
It seems to me they cited the wrong ordinance when that letter went out.
Well, I'm not quite sure if that, I don't think they started.
And they
judge did.
gave us a copy of the ordinance. So I'm looking and reading the ordinances, and I'm comparing them line by line, sentence by sentence, number by number, and noting the differences in how we, you know, have gone, that the acreage from the town is back as open space. The numbering is 35617 with River Road and Cross Avenue that the court ordered.
If I might, the ordinance was drafted by Mr. Serenian, reviewed by Mrs. Gruhl, reviewed by Mrs. McKenzie, the special master, and also reviewed by National Lead and Mr. Baker. And that included those specific sites. And so that court order, when we met on the 22nd, I'm not even quite sure if we had received it yet. If it was entered on the January 19th, I don't know if we
The
received it.
fax date on the top says the 19th, where it was faxed to
But
somebody.
that was the date the court had.
And the
entered.
court order is dated the 19th, and the
Right.
fax transmission date is the 19th.
It could have gone out to either Mrs. McKenzie or Mr. Serenian. That I don't know. I don't think it went out on that day. But that's the date the order was entered on, January 19th.
All right, the other thing is, I'm concerned about the town acreage. Is the judge aware that the town had decided not to, and it was rewritten in 39218, that the developer, you know, God forbid they got to develop it, did not get to use that acreage as part of their open space requirement, that the town owned without any compensation in any way.
Okay.
to the town.
392, I don't have that particular ordinance in front of me.
That was the one you tabled at the last meeting.
I know, but I guess.
And that only dealt with Cross Avenue National Lead Site. It didn't have River Road on
I
it.
don't think that's been entered into yet. We haven't adopted 39218 yet.
No, we tabled it.
Right, we tabled
Right,
it.
you tabled it, but that was at least an improvement where, God forbid, it got developed. They didn't get to use the town's acreage.
At this point in time, the court is going to entertain first the motion that was filed on Thursday, right? So that's March 16th. So between now and March 16th, the only thing that's going to occur is opposition being filed to our motion to amend, to have the court read all of our arguments, including credits, right? There's not going to be any introduction of ordinances, and not going to be any adoption of ordinances until that motion is heard.
Now, when you say opposition, okay, we've presented our case, so now you're saying National Lead has
National
14
Lead,
days to come in and oppose
National
it.
Ed, Kaplan, any other, maybe the special master has her comments. I don't think Sarah is opposing our own motion, but yeah, we're waiting for National Lead and Kaplan and the and the Fair Share Housing Center to receive any comments or opposition they have to the motion.
All right, so then they have 14 days to oppose our appeal process, which I hope.
Our motion.
Your motion.
Right.
And now, can you go into, since the court session, I am assuming, was public, open to the public and what have you, of what our motion included?
It included basically arguments from certain credits for certain adoption rights or certain notice. There are a bunch of legal arguments. The legal argument and motions, they were over 65 pages long. So,
Well, just the major highlights that the residents would be interested in, that I'm talking.
I think I explained that to you earlier on. The most important argument is the amount of credits that, based on Ms. Gruel's investigation and her interpretation as to our credits and discussions with Mr. McKenzie, or Ms. McKenzie, would allow us to amend or revise the settlement agreement. That's the crux of our argument.
That's the main point, is what you're
Correct.
saying.
Oh, without question. And that, in my opinion, my humble opinion, is a very, very legitimate argument.
Right, and then what you find out as far as the planning board and the appointments and things of that sort, I agree also that it's good to have checks and balances and have an independent review, that it's very valuable for you to review the situation, because the planning board attorney would not be independent and what have you.
And I agree with you. It's a very, very, very important board that needs to make sure that they dot their i's and cross their t's with respect to their decisions, because it's an extremely important board.
Right, because if we don't have checks and balances, we're going to have further errors and problems and litigation possibilities in the future.
And, right, and I totally agree with you. So your comments are well received, your opposition and Mr. Robinson's arguments are well received, and, I know that the motion contained many, many good arguments that hopefully the judge will see that we prevail.
I'm hoping so too. Now, I'll do Mr. Robinson a favor and ask about the appraisals on Kaplan 1 and Kaplan 2, or Camelot 1 and Camelot 2, because they already had their court order. I don't know if their appraisals have come in.
That's not going to be.
You're looking for the ones on Ernston Road?
Your property is Kaplan 1, Kaplan 2, right, because they also were engaged to, unless you want to take over for your property. So do you have the appraisals on those properties? Because there had been authorization to allocate $12,000 also for those properties.
I just want to make sure you're asking us why, okay, did we do appraisals on Kaplan 1? You're talking
Camelot 1,
Camelot.
Camelot 2, Kaplan 1, Kaplan 2.
I don't
They're
think we did-
used
I don't-
interchangeably.
I don't think,
All right, so I'm not naming the property, right? Sorry.
That's in prime.
right.
Let's cap on two.
We wanted appraisals on that to buy it too.
Right, and $12,000 was allotted for that property as well as $12,000 for Cross Avenue.
On the break, let me go on my break, okay, and I will let you know what we have received, okay?
All right, I'm sure Mr. Robinson and his neighbors are interested in that also. There you go.
You've seen this notice you got. What you're saying is that you got a notice and it referred to an ordinance, and the wording in the ordinance was not only Cross Avenue, it was also River Road, and the Cross Avenue part still included the part where they get to use our acre for nothing.
Oh, definitely, I have it right here.
I know we took that out.
I have it right here. Well, that's what I'm concerned about, because at least, I was upset that 39218 popped up, but at least that wasn't in it. But now 35617, which is the court order, has that going over as, allocated to their open space. So how can I put it? I'm surprised that, and this is where you haven't seen the court order ordinance. It doesn't become part of your packets.
If I may, I think this might bring some clarity, because I just referred over here to Mike Dupont in reference to it. You're absolutely right. The 392-18, which Councilman Buchanan just pulled, you're right. This is the one that is absent of the piece of property that is ours within the Cross Avenue site.
Right.
That's the ordinance that we tabled, that we never even got to. But it's my understanding that what you are receiving now, the reason why it's inclusive of that parcel is because the judge is acting and putting orders through based on what he felt was the original settlement agreement. So he is now having us put out notifications for what he is honoring and he believes is the original settlement. So is that accurate in what I'm saying?
That is accurate, and that inclusive, I mean, and I mean this sincerely, the motion itself had to be 10 pages, or 10 pounds. It was a lot of documents. Historically, institutional, between Susan, Jeff, Mr. Baker, I, myself, it was a lengthy process. So all of these arguments are being included in the motion.
In the motion.
And so, again, this is why this motion is extremely important. And we'll have a decision we will have a decision on March 28th. That's when the judge said that even though we'll have the oral arguments on March 16th, he will read his decision on March 28th.
All right, well, hopefully it'll be in our favor, and I thank you for your time and for taking the time and effort to explain the situation, because
It is confusing.
Right,
There are a
you
lot of
s-
ordinances, there are a lot of complex legal issues that are being presented, and there are a lot of interested parties. So it is extremely important that you come here and ask the questions.
all right,
You're
and-
trying to make sense of a 2-year process that went completely off the rails.
Right, and I only got involved when I finally got notified after your May 22nd meeting, and my first meeting I came to was the June 26th, when we presented the petition with the 480 signatures. The other thing is, if you find that to help the court case, we're still gathering signatures, and I haven't presented them yet. If they help your case at some point and you're ready for them, let me know.
Yeah,
should
no, you
present
should,
that.
no, you know what?
Yes, please.
Please.
You should present the petition, you know what, I'm sorry, what? I have the petition. Okay. Yeah,
Well,
so
that original
she's got
petition, of
more.
course, the ordinance numbers have
If
gone
you want to
hairy-carry.
If you want to supplement your signature pages, that's important.
All right, so, and it won't matter that we're dealing with the original ordinance number on the petition? We're dealing with 36617 on the petition.
And that's the original one.
That's the original,
366-17.
36617.
Okay.
But now we're going back, the court order is 356. It's 10 numbers sooner and what have you. That's why things were so confusing, so.
Mike, can I ask in the future that when a judge gives an order, instead of giving an oral report, that we see a copy of the order? Because that's not what was said. We were told it was strictly national ed.
Yeah, no, I thought it was in your package, but I'll make sure that it's sent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
got his
Janice. Are there any other questions? Yes.
Good evening. Ruth Ann Mahoney, 2 Gerard Place. Parlin. I just have two questions. One, on the latest mailing of the ordinances, was one sent to UBA regarding Sarebrook Townhomes? Because we were not notified. UBE is our management company for Sarebrook Townhomes. Did they receive, or were they sent the letter regarding all this?
I doubt it, because this particular ordinance apparently only applied
that's
to
what-
Cross Avenue and River Road. It
Okay.
didn't apply to National Lead. I
I'm
mean,
not
Kaplan.
to the Kaplan? Okay.
Didn't apply to Kaplan.
Just want to make sure. The other thing is, the new properties that are opening in Lemire, do they have affordable housing, am I correct?
Nope.
That's what I thought.
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Can they? Will they? We don't know.
Nope.
No, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Jim?
Sorry to continue on this, Mayor, but Mr. DuPont's answers raised some other questions with me. The proceeding that we are doing right now, it's in front of Judge Natalia, right?
Yes.
So
Natalia.
it's not actually an appeal, it's a reconsideration.
Yeah, that's why I had corrected
Okay,
it's a motion, yes. It's not an appeal.
so it's just a reconsideration of.
Well, it's not a reconsideration, it's a motion to amend the.
Motion to amend, okay. And in that 10-pound motion that we submitted, and boy, the more I listen to this, I so wish that we had the other professionals on board in the beginning.
I think we have
I
some-
don't think we'd be at this point now, and I think we might have saved an awful lot of money and had a lot better result. But in what was recently submitted, did we reference, and I forget the name of the apartments, but those that were constructed as a result of the conversion statute?
You know, off the top of my head, it's a very lengthy brief. I don't have that particular,
Okay.
I don't know. I do know that
I think it was mentioned.
it was in there. Yeah,
It
was
was
in
in
there.
there.
It was in there.
Probably about
Yeah, that was one of the.
pound 6, maybe? Okay, I think, because I think that's important.
It's a very lengthy brief, which contains a number of exhibits. And I know that it took my paralegal who sent it out to Terry either 3 or 4
Okay.
attachments to get it.
And
done.
I certainly don't want you to do anything that would damage our standing, but many, many months ago, when we talked about that conversion statute and what the planning board did, I raised the possibility that perhaps the governing body might have to sue the planning board. Is that something that is or Kaplan?
Well, you know, without breaching any discussion or attorney-client privilege, I know that issue has been, you know, discussed amongst the parties.
All right, thank you very much, I appreciate that.
Are there any other questions or comments? Being no other questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to close the public portion.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we're gonna go in a closed session for how long, man?
Just 5 minutes. It's my understanding that it's a pretty simple matter. Whereas Section 8 of the Open Public Meeting Act permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, whereas this public body is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist. Now therefore be resolved by the Mayor and Borough Council, Borough of Saraville, County of Middlesex, State of New Jersey as follows. The public portion of this meeting is hereby adjourned in order that the governing body may meet in closed private session for approximately 5 minutes to discuss the following matters: personnel, in particular police. Following the conclusion of closed session, the governing body shall reconvene the open portion of this public meeting to consider any other matters. The nature and content of the discussion which occurs in closed session shall be made public at such time as the need for non-disclosure no longer exists. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
What about the other 6? What about the other 6? What about the other 6?
I told you guys, I had nothing
let's discuss it.
That was the quickest close I've ever been in.
But I didn't see it.
Glad we're
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you. Am I right or am I wrong? It's really a budgetary
Let's
thing.
move ahead.
Okay, come on out, Tara.
And we're gonna have a budget workshop.
She's not coming.
She doesn't want to come out.
You ready, Terry? No. You ready to go home?
Then get ready.
Where's Vicky?
She went-
She went where Mary was. Okay, take a motion to go back
So
into
moved.
open? Second?
Aye.
All in favor?
Yep.
Take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we're gonna go right to the agenda meeting. Would everyone please stand for a salute to our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dan, just back up.
Terry, statement of publication?
Mayor, take notice that this agenda session meeting of the Mayor and Borough Council being held on this 12th day of February 2018 has been advertised and posted in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Buchanan,
Here.
Grillo,
Here.
Kilpatrick. Lembo.
Here.
Melendez.
Here.
Novak.
Here.
Okay, as I call them out, if you have questions or comments, please speak up. 395-18, 396-18, 397-18, 398-18. Committee reports, Administration of Finance, Councilwoman Novak.
Yes, Mayor, I move that the following minute departmental reports as listed on the agenda under A, number 1, Board of Education be received and filed.
Second.
Next.
Okay, applications for bingo licenses under B, as listed on the agenda under 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, be approved.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Next item.
Okay, tax appeals received from the following, we're going to forward that to the tax council, listed under C, number 1 on the
Next
agenda.
item.
Yes, Mayor, I'm looking to hold another budget workshop. The next council meeting is the 26th. Can we have it before, like we did today, starting at 6 o'clock? This will be on the operating budget as opposed to the capital.
You want it 6 o'clock?
Yes, please.
You don't want to do 5:30?
Excuse me?
You think 1 hour's enough?
Yeah, the operating budget's actually easier than the capital.
Are there any problems with 6 o'clock?
Nope. 6 is good.
Okay, we're looking, if everything goes all right, to introduce by March 12th, and for a public hearing to be held, the first meeting in April. Also, right now, with the business administrator and the finance committee and Wayne, we were at 14.9, it's almost 15 cents. And we have reduced it significantly. Everybody during this week will be getting a copy of where the reductions were made, so that you'll have that in your hand before we go to the next meeting, okay?
Anything else, Councilwoman?
Progress, Mayor.
Thank you. Planning and Zoning, Councilman Lembo.
Thank you, Mayor. Move the minutes be received and filed from the Planning Board of January 3rd, 2018.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Next
Have
item.
2 notices to adjacent property owners to receive and file from Bedell regarding 880 Main Street, and 2 from the Township of Edison. Receive and file.
Is there a motion?
Second.
Next item.
That's it, Mayor. Other than that, progress.
Thank you. Public Safety, Councilman Buchanan.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the minutes of the Board of Health from December 7th, 2017 be received and filed.
Second.
Next item.
Letter B, notice of retirement from Thomas Barbieri, receive and file.
Second.
Next item.
Letter C, Terry, everything's in order? We're good? Okay, then we'd like to get that approved.
Any objection? Next item.
Letter D, notice of resignation from Joan McCarthy, receive and
item.
file. Request for travel as listed, approved.
Any objection?
No.
Next item.
Applications for firefighters as listed, approved.
Any objection?
And
Next item.
letter G, resignation of firefighter, received and
Any
filed.
objection? Okay. Anything else, Council?
Yeah, Mayor, just one other thing. This week I met with the fire chiefs, and they are, back in 2015, Morgan Firehouse had a roof redone, and during that there was significant damage, and part of the damage that was not paid out was regarding their fire uniforms, and I asked Dan to look into it a little further. If he could just give me an update on that.
Dan, still don't have all the facts yet, so I'm gonna need a couple more days.
Okay.
Anything else, Council?
Yes, Mayor. I'm going to ask the chief to come up to give a quick presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Dan, I appreciate that. I was asked to come to today's meeting to give comment on a recommendation I made several months ago for hiring of police officers. I made a recommendation that we hire kind of off a calendar than the way that we normally do, which is usually for a January or an August class, and that we hire for, in this particular case, in an April class. And ordinarily, I would not make that recommendation, and I've made my feelings known before why I prefer one academy over another. But in this particular case, given the status of the number of officers that are retiring, as well as the number of replacements that we did lose over the last couple of weeks, I think it would be prudent upon the mayor and council to take that step and to hire early on a specific number of officers, and then to proceed further towards the latter part of the year, which would be the regular cycle in August as well.
How many are you looking to hire, Chief?
For the April class, we would be requesting 3.
Councilman Buchanan?
I'm in agreement with the
Is
chief.
there anybody not in agreement? Okay, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other than that, progress, Mayor.
Thank you. Recreation, Councilman Melendez?
Thank you, Mayor. Item A, no minutes or departmental reports. Item B, Durockridge's Temple to conduct religious celebrations on Saturday, March 10th and Saturday, April 14th, 2018 from 4 to 8.
Any objection? Next item.
Item number 2, Sayreville Police Auxiliary to conduct a fundraiser carnival at Kennedy Park on April 26th to 29th, 2018.
Any objection?
Item C, authorization to establish the following recreation programs and fees associated with said programs. A flag football sports camp, games from the street, 1-week program, $105 for residents and $130 for non-residents.
Any objection? Anything else, Councilman?
No, happy Valentine's Day, progress.
Thank you. Water and Sewer Environmental, Councilman Grillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I have no minutes or departmental reports for this evening, but I do have a report that was prepared by Jay Cornell, our borough engineer, something that I'd requested at our January 8th meeting after a number of water main breaks in town. They went back and looked at the last 5 years and the locations and number of breaks. There have been 143 water main breaks to the cost of just shy of $1.4 million in repairs since 2013. 29 breaks per year on average, with the cost of about $280,000 a year to repair. And so Jay's going to make a formal presentation on this and some of the recommendations that he has going forward. But I think this is going to be a priority item for the water, sewer, environmental. So I want to thank Jay for putting that together. And I think he'll have a lot of information to share it during his report. That's all.
Thank you, Councilman. Council President, Public Works, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I move the following minutes and reports be received and filed. The minutes of Solid Waste Advisory Council of December 12th, 2017.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank
Next
you.
item.
And notice of retirement received from Gary H. for his position as road supervisor in the Department of Public Works, effective April 1st, 2018. I know it's a little bit of ways,
Second.
but it will be here before we know it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. And I do have a couple of items to follow up on. Thank you, Mr. Dupont, first for updating the public on the litigation that we have moving forward. Hopefully, within the coming weeks, we'll have some better news than what we've dealt with over the last 2 years. At the last council meeting, I believe that we talked briefly about the park benches. Mr. Frankel, these are the park benches in reference to Kennedy Park. Since then, we were able to obtain some numbers from the Department of Public Works on how many that would be over the course of the next year. I know that one of the things that the DPW director has asked in order to come up with better numbers, so that Wayne, you can kind of give us a cost out of what it would be, is to select the benches that we liked the most based on that packet. I know that I myself, I liked the second one that was on the last page. Of course, I believe it was in the $400 range. What we need, though, is some type of a consensus here from the council so that we can move forward with pricing and then talk about a maybe planned phase so that we can start looking at which parks are going to get those benches first and moving forward. If the cost is too much, we might have to phase it in over a number of years. But at this point, in order to not delay any longer, I was hoping my council cohorts would be able to give their opinions to Dan Frankel as soon as possible so that we can move forward. If you didn't review that packet, it was handed out to us. I'm sure you have more.
Yeah, wasn't
Yeah,
there a
buy a
sponsorship?
bench.
So, do you have any details on that?
Well, that's exactly it. We could buy a bench, but regardless of how it happens, I think that we're going to have to look at having the borough at least purchase them and then perhaps do a reimbursement for individuals that want to turn around and put the placards on there, and then we can bring in that money, and that would offset the overall cost. What I would hate to do is wait for people to come forward. We might be only doing 1 or 2 benches, and that wouldn't be cost-effective when it comes to purchasing. I can't imagine our purchasing agent wanting to turn around and do a day-by-day, bench-by-bench order. So I think the first step, though, Mr. Frankel, if I'm correct, is that we need to identify which bench it is we want to purchase.
We'd have to identify them, yes.
Okay, so did my council cohorts have the opportunity to review that and look at that so we can get it to Frankel?
I like the one on the second page as well.
Me too.
Page as well.
That's the one I
Great.
like.
Second page as well. I don't know if Mr. Gorillo, what's up?
Do you know what it's,
Tell Terry what
Yeah,
the
it's here.
second page
Yeah,
is.
we have it.
Danny's
What's
got
on the second
Here we
page?
go.
There you go.
That's the
it.
one.
Danny's got it with him.
Thank you. Provided that, Mr. Grillo, you looked at that also, Councilman Grillo? And
I did.
You like the
it's the
second page?
prettiest.
Okay.
Anything else, Councilman?
Yes, I do have a couple of other things. We did have a subcommittee meeting in reference to the Board of Education. This is different than our liaison positions where we have residents. It was myself, Pat Lembo, and Danny Buchanan. We went over about 4 to 5 items that we'd like to bring to the Board of Education. I did email Board of Ed President Kevin Syak. He did just get back to me literally today. He was away in Washington, D.C. And I will email both Danny and Pat, but I wanted the public to know that we are trying to find ways to actually work together as our 2 entities and try to provide the best services for the town. So I'll email you the dates that Kevin sends over, but I wanted to update everyone since I just got it a few hours ago. Next, I did see that on our agenda, and I'm assuming that Mr. Frankel, I believe, you will update us on the food truck ordinances that we've been talking to, or, I'm sorry, Mr. Dupont?
Yeah, you know what, Council President, I have sat down with the Borough Clerk. We've gone over you have an ordinance called peddlers and hawkers. And so what I recommended, just to revise, rather than recreate the wheel, just to revise. What, Terry?
Amend.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Amend ordinance 8.3 called peddlers and hawkers to include language on the food trucks. So I have the language. I just want to insert it, and I hope to have a draft of it to you at the next meeting. But it will be under your ordinance already entitled peddlers and hawkers.
Perfect, thank you for doing that research. So it will be sent to the rewrite. Moving on, I do have 2 additional items. We talked at our budget meeting. One of the items that was under Parks and Recreations was regarding rubber matting for some of our parks. I mentioned it here at the council meeting. This would be eliminating mulch and actually bring in a rubber mat similar to what you see at the Center for Lifelong Learning and over at the park, the waterfront park, the county park, that is part of Saraville. Not only would that save us a lot of money when it comes to maintenance and bringing in additional mulch, but it's also something that has positive health connections to it as well. On our budget, we do have the pricing for at least 2 of the parks, which is the park right out here as well as Burks Park. I'm just going to ask, even though we mentioned at the budget meeting, that we take a look at the soccer complex, which we're already doing the upgrades for this year, and perhaps seeing how much it is for that from a cost perspective. It might be beneficial to do that park and maybe one of the other ones. So I just wanted to put that on the record for those residents that didn't attend the budget meeting or don't get an opportunity to watch it. My last item is a personal item. I just had to write down a couple of notes here. As many of you know, we had a Public Works employee that had passed away recently, Mr. Matt Winston. And one of the things that Matt was known to do was to take really exceptional care, and it became his own personal pet project, was the park located right down here at the end of Main Street called Miller's Corner. I've had numerous residents come and ask if I could bring this up at the council. They would really like to see, because he took so much care in working on trying to get that park upgraded. It's a little tiny little corner park. If there's any way that the council would entertain actually naming that park the Matt Winston Memorial Park. Everybody here knows how dedicated of a public worker that Matt was. He was my own personal friend, and I know that many of us miss him dearly. I don't think it's too much of a crazy request, but I don't know what the proper avenues is to do it other than to bring it before you. I did promise the residents that came to me that I would mention it here.
I think we just make a motion to have the park dedicated to Matt, and then we'll just set a date and time.
So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion that we dedicate the Miller's Corner Park in memory of Mr. Matthew Winston for his dedication and service all the years that he's been here working for us.
Second.
Second.
Roll call?
Councilpersons Kilpatrick,
Yes.
Buchanan.
Yes.
Grillo,
Yes.
Lembo,
Yes.
Melendez.
Yes.
Novak.
Yes.
And if I don't overstep my bounds on behalf of his family, his friends, and the people that came to me, I thank you in Matt's
Good
honor
idea.
for that. Other than that, progress.
Thank you, Council President. BA's report, Dan Frankel.
Thank you, Mayor. Council President Kilpatrick, I know in other towns with that, when they do memorial parks, they also do a sign that's at the
Yes.
park. So I'm just saying it's something that would be up forever, or as much as we can have something constructed. It would be in a tasteful way, but it's something that's, everybody would see the pocket park would be named after that.
And I appreciate
That, and
that.
I'd like to have a real ceremony,
Ceremony.
the way we did with Hausman down at the soccer complex when we named that field after him. I'd really like to see a ceremony, so sign just doesn't go up, and people are
Yes.
wondering, who is this person?
And since, Dan, you recommended that, I'd like to authorize you, if possible, to turn around and make sure that that memorial and that plaque is something that is beautiful and respectful, and just, confirm that we have everything on there that truly represents Matt.
Okay.
And then, of course, what Councilwoman Novak said, to have this as a public dedication, so we can notify the public and everyone else.
And his family?
So I'll need a motion on that
kids.
sign, I believe.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, everyone, again.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Authorization to request that the Army Corps of Engineer deauthorize the Titanium Reach and the South Channel in order to be able to construct a marina facility at the proposed Riverton Brownfields redevelopment project.
Next item.
Authorization to appoint Louis Hassel as Building Inspector, ICS, in accordance with Civil Service Promotional Procedures effective March 1st, 2018.
Next item.
Request received from Costa Verde Restaurant to relocate a portion of Cross Avenue, freeing up their property in order to add additional parking of their business. Their property has been paid over as a portion of Cross Avenue.
But it's
This-
not our property to give it to him.
It is our road, it's property,
Oh, okay, then get it the hell off.
right?
Yeah,
I
it's not our
don't
road.
know what the council has a pleasure of doing on this one.
If it's his property, it's his property. He's paying taxes on it.
Right.
Reconfigure the road, and that is a problem.
Do we want to reconfigure the road?
It's really not a road.
I mean, it's,
It's not even a
70
road, it's not even our property.
60 years.
yeah, has he abandoned that property in favor of a roadway?
No.
Has he abandoned that property in favor of road? No. He wasn't the owner of the property years ago when that roadway was installed.
I'm just wondering what his
Does this
deed
pass
said.
muster with Mike? I mean, is this?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is Transco, right? I was just.
No.
No.
What is
No,
this?
this is the.
Costa
Verde,
Costa
the
Verde
restaurant on
Restaurant,
35.
Cross Avenue.
Apparently Cross Avenue
The
kind of
paperwork's
cut
in
into
that
his
folder.
property for 30 years now.
And the road is closed once
Yeah,
a year.
it's technically not a road, it's National Ed's access. We don't even.
Yeah, you know what, why don't, if you could just table that and let me just talk to the.
There's nothing to table. We could just refer it to the borough attorney for further investigation.
Sounds good.
You could do that too. I was a step ahead of you, sorry. My bad.
Okay.
Next item.
Okay,
Dan.
authorization for Peter Sockler of Sockler Realty Services Group to review Transco appraisal value at a fee not to exceed $1,000.
Next item.
Authorization to advertise for bids for fire truck preventative maintenance and repair.
Next item.
Authorization to advertise for bids for the installation of a pole barn at the police firing range.
Next item.
Authorizing the borough clerk to advertise for the receipt of sealed bids for abandoned and unclaimed motor vehicles at various garages no longer required for public use in accordance with NJSA 39-108-1.
Next item.
Authorization for permission for the Sayreville Police Auxiliary to conduct a fireworks display at their carnival at Kennedy Park on April 27th with a rain date of April 28th, 2018.
Next item.
And we refer the fire prevention to file the proper
Paperwork.
paperwork. Authorization for the recycling coordinator to submit a grant application for a competitive recycling enhancement grant through Middlesex County Department of Public Safety and Health.
Next item.
Authorization to execute a shared services agreement between the Borough of Sayreville and the County of Middlesex for goose control in Sayreville Parklands at a fee not to exceed $10,180.32.
Next item.
Authorization to appoint Rita Januzzi, keyboarding clerk 4, in accordance with civil service promotional procedures effective March 1st, 2018.
May,
Next item.
wait, Dan, I would like to request that go back to January 1st, since this was first requested in November.
Up to
That'd-
council.
Say that again, Mary.
This was first requested in November, and for whatever reason, it kept not getting on the agenda. And I'd like
never
it,
saw
instead
it.
of effective March 1st, that it be effective January 1st.
Can you do that?
Certainly you can.
I beg your pardon?
Check Labor Council as to the.
Let's just make sure we're within the,
Just check
Oh,
Labor
we've
I
done it
mean,
before.
I don't wanna cheat.
I'm
Rita
just saying,
out of
we've
it.
done it before, so.
I think, you know, again, just out of abundance of caution, I know that you've done it in the past before, but I do think you just check with the Labor Council to make sure that we're not violating any type of contractual provisions
You're right,
with this particular vision.
you're right.
Next item.
So just so I understand, if the Labor Council says it's okay, is the council in favor of Councilwoman Novak to be effective as of January 1st? Okay. Authorization to extend contract for water meters and related equipment awarded to HD Waterworks Supply of Edison for a 2-year term with no increase in contract price.
Next item.
Authorization to purchase one tow-behind bypass pump from Xylem Dewatering Solutions of Edison, New Jersey, through New Jersey State Contract T2864/A85374.
Anything else, Dan?
Just we have to go closed session, Mayor.
Okay. CFO's report, Wayne Kronowski.
First item is a transfer resolution,
We-
if possible. Second item was covered by Councilwoman Novak, the budget workshop meetings. The third item is approval to fund the Winding Wood Pump Station improvements with funding from the sale of the Melrose Pump Station excess capacity. The amount of the funding would be $950,000. This would reduce the amount that needs to be bonded for that project. The funds are on hand from that.
Okay, any objection?
Do we need it or not? I think we need it.
Okay. Borough Engineers report, Jay Cornell.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 items this evening. First is the 2015 Road Project Phase 3, which was in Broadway Street and Jackson Avenue. That project's been completed. We're recommending a change order, closing out the contract, and there's going to be a net reduction, so you need a resolution at your next meeting.
Okay.
Second item Councilman Grillo spoke of was the study we did on the water main breaks based on information we received from the Water Department. As was indicated, you have approximately 29 breaks per year. You're spending about $280,000 per year repairing breaks, and there were approximately 25 locations in town that you had multiple breaks. what we found was that the heavily traveled streets, Bordentown Avenue, Route 9, Main Street, Washington Road, those streets were where you had the majority of your breaks. The problem that we had was we attempted to prepare a map where we were able to show exactly where the breaks were located. The information we received was not specific enough to really give you something where you can pinpoint an exact area where there was a break. As an example, Wickshire Boulevard had 7 breaks. Didn't really tell us where on Wickshire. Could have been at any location. One of the recommendations of our report is to try to go through and get more specific information from the water department. They have a handheld GPS unit where they can physically track a location of a water main break, provide us that information. It can be put on a GPS map. That way, the next time you look at this, you'll have specific information.
Okay. Any objection?
Mayor, second recommendation before I finish was funding for your water master plan update. The last time it was done was back in 1988. Your system has changed concerning your water plant, how it operates, where your development is in town, how you get water through the system. This would allow you to go through and model your system to determine if you're overstressing certain mains. Maybe they have to be upgraded. Maybe that's why you're having the breaks. So we had talked with Wayne about that. It's an item that's in your budget, so you may want to refer this to Wayne to look for funding for that water master plan so we can try to get a better idea of maybe why these breaks are occurring.
Okay.
Thank you.
Before we go to the next item, Michael Dupont, I'm sorry.
No, Mayor, we previously discussed that.
Okay. Two of the union reps spoke to me in the hallway that they wanted to discuss their contracts. The labor contracts are the purview of the business administrator. So I would recommend that the business administrator meet with them. If 2 or 3 council people want to meet with the business administrator so you don't have a quorum, that may or may not be appropriate. It would be a council decision. See what the issues are. But remember, labor contracts are the purview of the business administrator. Dan, you want to weigh in on this?
Mayor, I've had numerous meetings with 2 of the unions.
Okay.
We've talked. We have tried to have some common ground. It's been difficult, but we're trying to move forward till we find that common ground. So one of the biggest things that we have is issues that we know what they are. We know it's salaries, we know it's healthcare. We're trying to work through that. We're trying to be innovative. But those are the only 2 unions I have met with. I have also talked to Mike Thiel, who's president of the PBA. We've had initial discussions. They're just starting with them. So I don't know why they want to speak to
All right.
Mayor and
I'll
council, but
put it on the table for my colleagues, and we can discuss this.
no, just
Two.
2 of the unions did, right.
And we can discuss it more at the next meeting. If you have any questions, give Dan a call. With that, I want to do the public portion before we go to executive session. So with that, I'm going to open up the public portion for question or comments. Jim?
Thank you, Mayor. Jim Robinson, 11 Burrell Square. Mr. Frankel, you were going to check on appraisals?
I did not have a break, Mr. Robinson.
I'm sorry?
I did not have a break, Mr. Robinson.
Oh, okay, all right. 2 things then, Mayor, that I want to talk about. I've heard a couple times tonight folks refer to a quorum of the governing body not being present, so you didn't violate the Open Public Meetings Act. I would, and Mayor, when you first became mayor, I gave you a pamphlet entitled the Open Public Meetings Act that was written when Carrie Edwards was the Attorney General. And I reminded you that the law does not talk about avoiding a quorum. It talks about avoiding an effective majority. And an effective majority is different from a quorum. An effective majority is a majority of a quorum. So on the council, 4 people are a quorum. 3 people are a majority of the quorum. And the interpretation that the Attorney General gave, and there's been case law on this, and I'm sure Mr. DuPont can give you much better information than I can, with 4 council members, you can have a meeting. if there's an issue that comes up, 3 people voting in the affirmative can pass something. That is what an effective majority is. So I would caution you to, I know you're trying to comply with the law by avoiding a majority. The law says you have to avoid an effective majority. So maybe it's time to pull out that pamphlet if you still have it, or I still have it, I can email it to folks. They haven't redone it since Carrie Edwards was the AG, but it's a very valuable pamphlet. The other thing, Mayor, we started this meeting at 10 to 9, and the agenda session is really very important. And years ago, and I've been coming to these meetings probably longer than some of you, and I stopped for a while, and you're probably very happy I did. But the agenda session used to be on a different night than the regular meeting. And it used to be in 310. People sat across the table from one another. You could look one another in the eye, and you had real discussions about things that are very important. Now, we're at the public portion already. There's only one other thing, the closed session. It's taken half an hour to discuss very, very important things. And since I've been coming to these meetings in the last year, or coming back to these meetings, and I don't mean this to be offensive, there are times where I think you, in all honesty, would say you were embarrassed to be sitting there because you didn't know what a particular ordinance meant, or there were a couple times that you actually had to break to resolve something, and then you came back after 10 minutes after the attorneys and the administrator and folks got together. And that's not because you didn't know what you were doing or you didn't care. That's because you have these agenda sessions where you try and get this stuff done, where you sit at a dais, where you don't sit at a conference table, where you can look at one another, where discussion is facilitated, and you try and do this. And in fact, you know, now I know that when you go into closed session, you say, it'll be 5 minutes. I looked at the minutes and listened to the tapes of the COA meeting, where you went into executive session to discuss that, and that was said there. Before you went into executive session, the mayor said, it'll just be 5 minutes, folks. No wonder we're in the situation we're in. And Mr. Rittenhouse has said many times that, well, these things were presented. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't, I don't know. But I will tell you, whether they were or whether they weren't, if you're in, and I don't know if you went into that room or that tiny room, you went into that room to discuss it. In 5 minutes, you can't discuss the nuances, the things that are important. I mean, there are a lot of things, even tonight, there are a lot of things. There are some things that didn't have to be discussed. Letting the firemen go to Belmar, yeah, that's fine. I don't think that needs discussion. $950,000 for the water plant, or the problem with all the 143 water main breaks, that's probably something that ought to be discussed a little bit more than was discussed tonight. So what I'm suggesting, and just like the woman from Singer Court, I don't want to complain without making a suggestion. I'm going to suggest that you go back to that. That worked well. We didn't have the problems that we have now, and these problems aren't just a little embarrassing if you're watching on television, or a little inconvenient. They have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in litigation because things were rushed through because you didn't discuss them. And Mayor, I remember when we switched, and I think it was to accommodate your job schedule because you traveled and things like that. You don't have that position anymore.
No, that wasn't when it was switched. It was a council decision. I think it was brought up by former Councilman Stanley Droll and several other of his colleagues up on the dais, where they didn't see a need for 2 long meetings. They felt that it could be accomplished in 1 meeting.
Okay. Well, he's no longer here. Maybe he didn't get reelected because he didn't discuss things thoroughly enough.
No,
But
he
I would-
decided not to run.
I would respectfully suggest that you give that some consideration, because a half an hour to discuss things that are as important as you should be discussing. And you really can't, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, this is meant for a public meeting, where you address the public, where you, for lack of a better word, play to the audience. When you meet in 310, the public can observe, they can watch, they can be there, but it's for you folks. It's for you folks to discuss things and decide them and have the give and take and the negotiation and the thorough understanding of what you're voting on. So the things that have happened in the last year don't continue to happen. Because as I said, they're not just inconvenient, they're not just a little embarrassing. They, you know, frankly, and I like most of you personally, it's a little embarrassing to say this is my governing body when they get so befuddled that you have to take a break. And I remember when I was involved with the COA thing in the neighborhoods, I can't tell you how many people told me they watched this stuff on television and they referred to things as a cluster something or other. And not just one or two or three or four. I mean, and that ought not to be how people reference our governing body. They ought to say, yeah, those men and women know what they're doing. I'm proud that they are our elected officials. It's obvious that they take the time, they do their homework, they know what they're talking about. They study these things, and I would respect, and I know it's another night, another few hours, but you know what? I think it's important, and I would respectfully suggest that you give that some consideration. One other question, as long as I'm here, Mayor. The COA resolution, can you very briefly explain that?
Did you read it?
The COA? No.
You didn't read it?
No.
You, of all people.
I didn't read it. Where is it? Is it in the back?
You don't have a copy? I thought you
I
would
have a copy.
Okay.
If I had a copy, I'd read it.
I guarantee you would. The genesis of this is it's a compilation of all the different committees, boards, councils, you name it, within the borough, coming from a concern that there was not enough public involvement with the with COA regarding how it would affect essentially public uses. And I've used the example of parkland, right? Rec should be involved in the discussion of if we have X amount of new homes, how will that affect their budgets, their planning, their property. Same thing with the library, same thing across the board. And so the particulars here is that each of these councils, groups, whatever you want to call them, would have one elected representative who would serve on an advisory board and would report to the municipal housing liaison, who is Dan Frankel at this point, and that they would meet monthly, bring up questions, and those questions would be referred to the municipal planner so that we have better dialogue between those bodies and the council.
Okay, I think we do have in our ordinance something called an advisory board to the planning board. I don't know if the mayor has appointed folks to that board, but maybe that ordinance exists already.
Not in the way it's constituted where, in this order, and obviously you haven't read it,
Okay.
but where each of these committees would have one designated representative.
Okay, and folks who have input, should have input over their discipline. I would just caution that something as important as COA really requires, and maybe this doesn't apply, but in a perfect world, it really requires the planning board that's supposed to have expertise in a matter that's
The planning
supposed to
board,
have.
the planning board will not participate, the zoning board will not participate due to
Okay.
their internal requirements. Sarah has chosen not to for their own
Okay.
reasons. They're more than welcome. The ordinance as written says they can send a representative if they like. But
Okay, thank you very much, and if you'll email, are there copies of that here?
I'm sure the clerk can provide it for you.
Okay, thank you. In the back? Okay, thank you
I'm
very
surprised,
much.
I thought it would be out.
It is.
Okay.
Steve?
You know, first I'd like to, echo Jim's first comments on the coordination and getting all the facts on the table. And However, a little confusing tonight with the different ordinances, especially surrounding what Janice was saying here on the podium. But speaking to 39718, I had questions on section 2-68-2, and that was
Give me a second to dig it out. Yes.
section B, and it's just a claritative question, 2 questions actually.
Yes.
In B, it says that the mayor and borough council are prohibited from nominating members to the COA Oversight Committee and are simply empowered to approve the members nominated by each agency, authority, board, or commission.
Mhm.
My question is, only approve? Can they veto?
I suppose it doesn't specifically say veto. The intent of this paragraph is that the borough council and mayor would not be able to participate in the appointment to keep this not only apolitical, but allow the decision of each board to stand as it is without any influence from the mayor or council.
Okay, and the second point I have for clarity is in that same section D and F, you know, where it states that COA Oversight are going to report monthly on the progress, questions, and concerns of the COA Oversight Committee to the mayor and borough council. My question is, does that report come to this public meeting, or is that something else that should be at maybe a second meeting that Jim suggested, which I second?
No, I think it can be done at this meeting. In fact, I think it's probably best because the council is obviously present and we get the largest crowd of the public. But the idea here is that the municipal housing liaison would make his report. If there's action that needs to be taken, the council can then have the municipal planner take that action. That was part of Councilman Buchanan's concerns, which I edited to remove the municipal and borough planner over cost. This would allow us to streamline things a little better. Some questions that could potentially be answered by Dan Frankel or Mike Dupont or other members of the council would not have to be referred to the borough planner. So we could expedite things a little bit and save some cost. So we're trying to think of it in a top-down manner.
Okay, and you know, I know that we said that, or I heard it was stated just before, that certain committees opted out.
Correct.
I think that's a mistake, because if we're going to get this to be fully functional and cover all the avenues that we need to cover, if, say, the library bowed out, those costs, they want to bow out, they should be eliminated from any kind of other thing. They need that input so you can get a good performer. That's why I had some questions before.
It's the beauty of democracy. If they don't want to show up, then they don't get a voice, right?
But then again, does it negatively impact the borough and the town?
You know what? Those are people that, and not to get too deep in the woods, but those are people that are appointed by the council. Those are people that volunteer. We can't force anybody to participate. I don't think that would be the right thing to do. I'm hoping that each of those boards would say, you know what, this is a worthwhile experience. This is something we should be contributing to, but you can't force anybody to.
And that lack of force or enforcement can trickle down to negative impact on the residents of the town. So I object to that strongly.
You know, we live in a country where 30% of the people come out to vote for president, so I don't think we should be surprised when people don't participate in local government. Respectfully, Steve, I kid, but no. I mean, I think that's also part of the reality here. But I think that this gives a very streamlined way, a very organized way for these bodies to participate. It's as simple as picking a designee and having them come to a meeting once a month. You can't make it much simpler than that.
Yeah. I think, you know, to their benefit too, they should be vying for their own piece of the budget, for how this
Absolutely.
Impacts them, for the, you know, the families that are coming in under the housing and the development, you know, one way or the other.
And I think this gives them the structure to do so.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other, Ruth Ann?
Hello again. Just 2 positives.
You need,
Ruth Ann Mahoney, 2 Gerard Place in Parlin. Just 2 positives, because we need positive too. We had a confusion at my house that we just bought with the water, just a cap or something. But they came out, I called, and a gentleman called me back and was taken care of most immediately. And I greatly appreciate that could be done. Everybody who said they'd called, very pleasant, was taken care of, all done. The other thing is, I saw the sign in Morganville I don't know how long it's been there, sorry. But it looks very nice. They're my two positives. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. Ken?
Ken Olszewski, 108 North Edward Street. Two things that have just come up I want to comment on. First of all was Mr. Robinson's suggestion of a separate meeting, that the council meeting be separated from the workshop. In the 6 years I served on the governing body, that's how it was. And of course, there were some differences. In those days, the public did not participate at agenda sessions. That's new. Our agenda sessions lasted hours and hours, and a lot of it involved, I'm sorry to say, borough workforce that had some significant problems built over a period of years. I can remember things like 30 people in the Public Works Department, and they had a check mark next to 12 of them, and you said, well, what are these check marks for? Well, they were the 12 people that were had a DWI, and so they weren't able to participate in driving a vehicle. And I don't want to belabor that, but we had a lot of things that are much better today, that has been cleaned up over the years. However, I think Jim's point is well taken, and I hardly endorse it, because it's very difficult for us to sit back here and listen to you who are boom, boom, boom going through these things. And a lot of them are routine, and you can go through them quickly. But some of them, unfortunately, I believe have cost the taxpayers a lot of money. And I think Jim pointed out the one about the COA, the affordable housing issue. Having professionals that perhaps were not the right people in the right job. And some people on this governing body didn't listen to the public in the last year when we came here. They didn't listen at all. Some people voted against hiring Susan Grohl, our new planner, and gave some people in the audience a lot of flack over that. And I see this this COA Oversight Committee. I'm not endorsing this, but at least it's a recognition that there needs to be more input. I'm the first guy that brought that up, that when this stuff was before the planning board, we already have a planning board liaison, that this did not come back properly to the governing body and to the public. And I talked about in later meetings how when the public finally found out about this, that this room was full. There was standing room only. So if this COA Oversight Committee is going to help some of that, and the lack of communication, which I think was, there were methods already in place. Some people just didn't do their job. And I can tell you this, I hope nobody is going to sit here and take credit for the fact of the things that they fought us on, because if in fact that's true, then I would suggest that they be nominated for the gold, the silver, and the bronze medal in the Hypocrite Olympics, because that strictly is what it would be.
Hey, Ken,
just
since we're
being a
talking about
hypocrite.
hypocrisy, I'm just curious. You said that you think this is a good idea, but you wouldn't endorse it. Did you make a mistake? Were you
No, I
confused?
didn't make a mistake at all. I have not read it thoroughly, and I have not had time to review some of the. I don't have the
I was
questions
just curious
and
because
ramifications. I didn't come
there's
up
a lot
here.
of things
I just
going
said
on.
I
was just-
merely didn't come here to endorse it, but I wanted to discuss it and
Oh.
say that it could be a good idea.
Who would you like to give credit to? Just
I'm
'cause
sorry?
You said people shouldn't take credit for writing an ordinance. Who would you like to give her credit to? I'm just curious.
Who would would I like to give?
Yeah,
the
you just said
credit
you
to?
wouldn't give anybody credit for coming up with that idea. Who would you like to give credit to?
I didn't refer to this COA committee. I referred to having better discussions and better information. I would give the credit to the people who have sat here in this audience and have come up and spoken at this microphone, because some people didn't listen to it. Some people voted against Susan Gruhl.
That's actually,
and gave
I
us a
don't
very hard
think that's
time.
factually accurate. I believe Susan Gruhl was approved 6-0.
Oh, no, not now I'm not talking about. I'm talking about when it was first proposed, as Mr. Robinson said earlier. No, when we talked about having another planner, another set of eyes, that didn't go over if you look at the record with all the members of the governing body and you look at the vote on it. Go back and look at that.
No, I remember it.
No, I hope you remember it, because everybody didn't endorse that. So don't say that because you got on board the train before the final stop and before the success was already there, that you're a part of it. Because, and I didn't single anybody out, but if you want to talk about individuals, if the shoe fits, wear it, Steve. You go back to the minutes and find out where people stood on it. I didn't come here to get confrontational and to single people out.
No, I was
but-
just confused about the COA Oversight Committee, because you
well,
said a
that's
couple of
fine.
things
Yeah,
that...
I just said I didn't
Yeah.
endorse it because I really didn't have.
I
the
hope you do.
chance
I
to
hope you
review
hope
it.
Mr.
And
Robinson
I may
has a
very
chance to
well, and it may be. At
I think you
least
may be
somebody's
pleased.
got an idea and put it forward, and we need something to help us, because, quite frankly, this COA issue is going to cost the taxpayers of this town a lot of money. And I'm not blaming anybody specifically or individually, but some of it, I think, is common sense, that we may have not had the right people collectively in the right job to take care of this. And for instance, we're talking about the judge coming before the judge. Mr. Dupont was talking about it, and I was the one that leaned over to Mr. Robbins and said, "By the way, fill me in. Who is the judge are we talking about here? Is this Judge Natale, or are we before an appeals court?" So if this stuff, all this compilation of 10 pounds of material that was made, this seems to be kind of a do-over, really. I mean, some of this should have been done in the first place. I hope this 10 pounds of material can be used and will be used, and we don't get charged for it again if this winds up in an appeals court. But I know it's budget time, and you know, some of the numbers being bandied about, I know they're initial numbers, but they're a little bit scary. So I think everybody needs to spend a little bit more time on this. And the initial suggestion of Jim Robinson about having workshops on a different night, I hope they wouldn't take the 3 or 4 hours that we used to have to sit through on it, because I think, as I told you, things are different. But I think it's well worthwhile. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Being no other questions or comments, I'll close the public portion.
So moved.
Sir, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Take a motion for adjournment? Oh, closed session, sorry.
Mayor, at this
We will adjourn when we come out of closed session.
Whereas this public body is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist for closed session, now therefore be resolved by the mayor and council of the Borough of Sayreville, County of Middlesex, the public portion of this meeting is hereby adjourned, in order that the governing body be made in closed private sectionally for approximately 5 minutes to discuss personnel tax collector. Following the conclusion of said closed session, the governing body shall reconvene the open portion of this public meeting to consider any other matters which may be properly brought before at this time. I don't know, are we?
Make a mo,
The nature and content of the discussion which occurs in closed session shall be made public. As the need for non-disclosure no longer exists, the resolution shall take effect immediately, and there will be action following the conclusion of this.
Is there a
so
motion?
moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Exactly. I don't think I missed it. It's always interesting.
not even gonna sit down.
George?
Everybody move out of here. We gotta go. Okay. Is everybody out here?
Yes, you do.
Is Terry out here? Are you a vegetarian? I couldn't live without meat. Thank you. I saw my text. Thank you. Okay. Terry, are you on? The recorder on? Motion to go back into open?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Oh, crap, yeah. Okay. I
This one happens
rescind.
when you rush.
Yeah. Sorry. Sorry.
So now we need a motion to appoint, and we
Yeah.
list on the next consent agenda resolution.
Oh, Nolan. What's his first name, Dan? Sean.
I will second
Oh, I
that.
make a motion that we appoint Sean Nolan as the tax collector, and it'll be on the agenda for the next meeting.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Danny
Thank
and
you,
Pat,
everyone.
I need you for a minute.